This is going to be a great day. I have been passing this little parking area on Kyle Canyon Road for a couple years now. And the reason I've wanted to park here is that it has very important access to this feature in the La Madre Mountains wilderness. And it's on the northeast end, the very northeast end of the La Madre Mountains wilderness. In fact, here is La Madre Mountain on the horizon over this ridge in the foreground. There's La Madre Mountain. But the interesting thing about this feature is that it's a ridge line that I can see from my backyard in Centennial Hills, very prominent. And I just imagine that standing on top of this ridge line is going to provide an incredible view of the Las Vegas Valley. So I've wanted to go up onto this ridge line for some time, and there are a number of really great reasons to do this besides the spectacular view. It's one of those areas that is, I put it in the Las Vegas metropolitan area section of LasVegasAreaTrails.com because it's a trailhead and an adventure that you can experience. You can get to the trailhead within 10 minutes of the Las Vegas metropolitan area. So it offers opportunities to come here on a regular basis just for workouts. There are a number of horse farms or horse ranches in the area, and I'm noticing that the trail system, and there is a great trail system that goes all the way around this feature, and it's about 30 miles to completely circle this ridgeline on the trails. But there's a great trail system, and I imagine you can mountain bike it. I believe it's probably used a lot by the horse ranchers. Anyway, yeah, this area has quick access from Las Vegas and spectacular view from the summit. So, what's the name of it? What's the name of this feature? Well, I'm calling it, I couldn't find a name. So, you know me, I name things. And so I'm calling it Harris Springs Canyon Ridgeline. And the reason for that is that there is the name for this canyon that you see immediately below. It's Harris Springs Canyon. No name for the ridgeline, so let's just call it Harris Springs Canyon Ridgeline for now, just so we have a way of naming it and identifying it. So let's head down and see what it's like to actually ascend this. And it looks like there might be a fairly gradual approach on this side. We'll get a closer look. I know the sun is kind of blinding the details of this ridge, but we'll clarify all that. Here we go. Huge wash below. Beautiful wash, actually. Look at that. And great view of the Mount Charleston Wilderness. Another wonderful feature of this ridgeline is that you'll be able to view at the same time Mount Charleston Wilderness, La Madre Mountain, and the Las Vegas Valley. And so what we're going to do is continue on this trail, and hopefully it descends into the wash, and then we need to look for an ascent route. So here we go. Well, that wasn't too hard. Here we are in the wash. And I take it this little vehicle barrier may mark the edge of the La Madre Mountains wilderness. And so looking around, yeah, here's our target ahead. And by the way, we are at 4,000 feet right now, and the summit, which is up in this area, is around 6,000 feet. So it's going to be a 2,000 foot ascent. But the ridge lines, I mean, the slopes look very gradual. We'll see how that bears out because things in the La Madre Mountains wilderness always look easier from a distance. There's a lot of vertical limestone areas, but the limestone also is very firm as opposed to a lot of the sandstone in the Rainbow Mountains. So it looks like a very possible, perhaps even easy ascent. Soon we shall see. First discovery, there's quite a network of trails in this area. And I see that they're used by horses and by dirt bikes so far. I imagine mountain bikes would work on these trails too, but you can't go too far without finding a trail. So that's a good sign. And we're continuing on, hoping to ascend the slopes to the right of the sun. So let's see how that goes. And it's always good to keep reference points in mind when you are in an area for which you are not familiar. Here is a distinctive little hill, and to the left of that hill is the trail that takes us back to our starting point. And then look over here. How beautiful. Here is Gas Peak. We are going to see such spectacular views. So much is visible from this ridge line. It's like we're right in the center of the whole wilderness surrounding the Las Vegas area. After that last rise, another huge wash presents itself, and actually a wilderness valley, very beautiful. So we're going to head down and then look for an approach upward. And another interesting discovery from this point is here's a ridge line, and it appears to be heading toward the La Madre Mountains. And there's La Madre Mountain right in the center. Interesting possibilities. And then you can see the ridge line heading down to the left from La Madre Mountain. And right here, Little La Madre. And then down further, and maybe this ridge line actually connects, but I see a break right here. So another possibility might be to take this valley, and this is another adventure in the future, but take this valley and ascend this ridge line and see if that might lead up to the upper La Madre Mountains. Now, as I mentioned, the ridge that we are headed for, that is right under the sun, 6,000 feet. The base of the ridge, the valley below here, 4,000 feet. And La Madre Mountain, about 8,003 to 500 feet. So it gives you an idea of elevation in the area. And then, wow, look at this. What an awesome view. And the lighting is just perfect for Mummy Mountain in the Mount Charleston Wilderness. And Mummy Mountain, you can see the Mummy's Toe, about 11,000 feet on the left, and under that toe a little bit to the right side of that cliff that's Mummy's Toe, that pointy area, is Rain Tree. And then there's the summit of Mummy Mountain, 11,519 feet. And you can even see Mummy's Nose. Wow, what a lot of beautiful features are visible here. And then you can see the terrain here. There's creosote, and the creosote separates itself by about 15 feet. If you look at all the creosote bushes, they're separated by about 15, 20 feet. They send out poison from their roots to keep other creosotes away and other plants away because water is so scarce. So they space themselves. And then we've got Joshua trees, yucca plants. Wow, just beautiful. And now you can see opening before us a great view of Gas Peak. And then over to the left, there is over this ridgeline in the foreground, there is Fossil Ridge, ancient fossils, 450 million years old and older, from when this whole area was covered by shallow sea. And then here is the Sheep Range. So yeah, already without ascending the ridgeline, we're seeing some amazing scenes of the surrounding wilderness. How beautiful. And one of the most amazing things is it's only about 10 minutes from the Las Vegas metropolitan area, and few people know this wilderness here even exists. One final wash to cross. Actually, it's a split from that wash we were looking at earlier. And then it looks like a gradual ascent up the ridgeline here. We will see. And looking around, these washes are just huge and unexpected. You're driving down Kyle Canyon Road. It looks like everything's pretty level and flat around here, but you don't get very far before you find that the terrain is a lot more complicated than it looked. But that makes it interesting. Wow, this is so amazing. About 10, 15 minutes from where I live in Centennial Hills. And I've never been here before. Yes, we just don't visit those places that are close to home. We take them for granted. Continuing toward the ridge line, yeah, I just crossed that valley, and now I find myself in the midst of a pretty substantial Joshua tree forest. If you're from the Pacific Northwest, where I'm from, you'll think, hey, this is not a forest, but this is a forest, Southwestern US style forest. Wow, look at this. And then a great shot of the sheep range through the Joshua tree forest. Here's a small dilemma. Um, as I started out so early, I'm blinded by the sun going forward, so I can't really pick out the best route with any clarity. And there are a number of intervening ridges here, just a network of ridges and washes. But the problem is, okay, you think start out later in the day. Well, maybe you wouldn't make it up in time to really explore if you start out later. But okay, then start out later on a longer day. Like in the evening would be ideal, except that when you have a long evening, it's summer and you're looking at temperatures of around, well, over 100 degrees, between 100 and 110 degrees here in the summer. It is the second week in February. So, yeah, starting out in the morning, second week in February, expect to be blinded by the sun and just have to really squint to pick out your approach route. So we'll head up this direction and see where it leads. And here's a quick view around. Look at this. Just incredible. Each scene would make a beautiful painting. Sheep range. Back to the ridge line. You can see there are gradual approaches, but as I mentioned a little earlier, this ridgeline's huge, and the trail around the ridgeline is about 30 miles. And so to get to the base of this ridge from where it's low, from where we parked, it'd take a lot of time. And in fact, you can't park down there because that's horse ranch territory, private property. So yeah, a lot of complications present themselves, but nothing really major at this point. Let's continue on. As we ascend above the wash, we're now entering a limestone area, and this whole region, like I mentioned, is an ancient seabed. Limestone is the ancient sea floor, basically solidified by the calcium from the animals at that time. And you can actually see, if you look closely, you can see evidence in this limestone of the sea fossils. And here is a little shell. And I imagine there's a lot more to come along this route. View is becoming more expansive by the minute as we ascend. There's La Madre Mountain. We see it from a number of different perspectives. And I guess you could take the wash below. We were just in that wash and have been ascending above it. You could take that wash and then it looks like you could take some of the ridge lines here on the other side up to La Madre Mountain. That'd be an eastern approach. Very interesting. We'll try that. It's on the list. And so, as I mentioned, the wash we just ascended from, and again, that is Harris Springs Canyon. Circles around Harris Springs Canyon. Over here, Fossil Ridge, that line of limestone. A lot of nautilus fossils there. Sheep Range, around 10,000 feet in elevation at its highest point, which is Sheep Peak and Hayford Peak. One of the horse ranches below, or a few of the horse ranches, I guess. Been looking over to the Mount Charleston Wilderness, and here is Angel Peak. We'll see a better view of Angel Peak later. And then Mummy's Nose, Mummy's Chin, the summit, and Mummy's Toe. I guess Mummy just has one toe. Better view of Mummy Mountain. And then here is Charleston Peak. Less snow than you'd usually see this time of year. Been a drier year. And then you can see the southern Kyle Canyon rim. Then on up to Griffith Peak. And in the foreground, that peak that has some trees on it is Harris Mountain. There's a saddle between, and that saddle is the upper end of Lovell Canyon. And then over back to La Madre Mountain. And the ridge line. We are trying to pick out a route here to ascend, blinded by the sun, but it looks to me like we might want to just keep going up in this direction. Hopefully we won't end up with a dead end. If we do, then this lower ridge line in the foreground will have to find a way to traverse over to that ridge line. I'm hoping that there's a connection up here, because once you're on that ridge line, you can continue up quite a ways. Looks like it's a little more complicated as you get higher. We'll have to figure that out when we get up there. And hopefully the sun will be at a height that it won't be blinding us. Onward. And by the way, this little ascent ridge I'm on, near the base of this ascent ridge and close to the wash below, there was a cairn, which leads me to believe that somebody has marked this as a route. And then it's always good to look at what the terrain looks like on the way home. You see roads, and there is that exact spot where we descended into the first wash. And there's one of the marker hills. Want to keep an eye on. Notice the rocky summit area. So, yeah, that is the way back home. Okay, onward and upward into the sun. I know you've probably been thinking, why didn't I send the other side of this ridge line in order to not have the sun blinding me? Well, the other side's pretty vertical. So that's the reason. Okay, continuing on up, and I believe this is the summit area right up there. But we've got a ways to go, and the terrain does not look smooth and even in all directions. So a lot of surprises ahead. Continuing to ascend into the rising sun, and here's perhaps a better look at the terrain near the summit high point. See, it's pretty imposing in places. There's a line of cliffs here, and I guess one could take the base of those cliffs and head down into the valley below where we came from. Wow, look at this expansive view. So amazing. And yeah, I believe we can see the trailhead parking area right down in this area. But the reason I stopped, I wanted to point out, I mentioned that there were cairns below, or there was a cairn. And look, here are a couple more cairns. So let's follow those and see if they'll help us circle around on this ridge. And all we need to do is get over to this next ridge system, and then things look a lot more gradual, but no promises. A lot of surprises up in this area. So let's head this way. Quick answer to that question, does this ridgeline continue? Remember, that's a cairn that we saw just a moment ago. And guess what? Here's another cairn, and the ridgeline does indeed continue upward. But it looks like there's a whole lot of rugged terrain between where we're standing and the summit. But one good thing is that we can just follow the cairns. Maybe they'll take us all the way up. And it looks like there also is a little pathway that appears and disappears, then reappears along the way. Speaking of rugged, yeah, I know this crack below would lead up to the summit area, which is up there. But who wants to go down there from here? Fortunately, it looks like I can continue along this ridge. In fact, it connects with the next ridge that I thought might have a gully like this between the ridge we're standing on and this next ridge. Fortunately, no. It continues up in a gradual way. So, yeah, going to head up and over to this distinctive high point, and then just evaluate where we are standing. and can I continue further on the ridge? I think when I reach that high point, we'll be able to look down at a spectacular view of the Las Vegas Valley. But yeah, like I said, very rugged, unexpected cliffs and canyons opening up. A lot of limestone. Fortunately, it has great traction. And back to this next ridge where we will hopefully continue on upward to the Harris Canyon Springs Ridgeline, or Harris Springs Canyon. Yeah. Okay. Up we go. Okay, there's the wash below, and you can see where it splits. If you look straight ahead, you're looking at the parking area, trailhead parking on Kyle Canyon Road. And here's that huge crack. And as I mentioned, you could actually ascend and descend right along the base of these cliffs on the other side of the crack, and perhaps even up the slope there. But look at this. There, I think on the horizon is the summit. I am actually standing on that point. We saw the rocky high point that I thought was the summit. No, we are still about 800 feet below the summit, believe it or not. We have been ascending. You see this huge distinctive crack I pointed out just a moment ago. We have been ascending the ridge line on the, I guess it would be the northeast side of the crack, the right side looking down, left side looking up. Um, One thing I'd like to point out is that this has been pretty much a class 1, class 2, class 2 walk all the way up so far. No rock scrambling required to see what we're looking at here. It's just amazing. And you can see how the contour continues up, kind of blinded by the sun once again, but things are becoming a little more clear as the sun rises. Okay, so let's continue on up. I keep thinking the ridge line that I see on the horizon is the summit of the ridge line, and we can then, when we get up to that point, look over and see the Las Vegas Valley. But there always seems to be one more high point beyond. Here's a look at that gully, big crack down here, as you can see. And you could descend. I don't see any impediment to descending this crack right along the base of the cliffs on the far side of the crack. It does look very loose as far as the rock. So yeah, I prefer this ridge line we have been on. And again, the ridge line is on the northeast side of the crack. And it's pretty clear where to go because the ridge line circles around and winds upward to that horizon ridge summit. that we looked at a moment ago. But what I want to show you now is here's a sweeping look down. And remember where we entered that first wash, right in this area. And then beyond is the trailhead parking area. So it's pretty much a straight line. And there are many ascent routes on this side of the ridgeline. Like I said a little earlier, the opposite side is very vertical, but this side, you can see there's a lot of gradual approaches. I like this ridge that I'm on because there's a lot of solid limestone on this ridge, which makes for very good footing. And like I said, the ridge leads around, but then you see another ridge over in this direction that leads down. Why didn't I take that ridge? Remember how massive this overall ridge that we're on, which I call Harris Springs Canyon Ridge. Remember how massive it is. Had I sought to go up that further ridge on the near horizon here, it would have added 5 miles, maybe more, to this adventure. So the approach I've taken today is really the most direct approach from the trailhead. Works out well. And wow, look at the mountains on the horizon. La Madre Mountain. Over to Mount Charleston Wilderness, Griffith Peak, the pointy peak there. Mount Charleston. Fletcher Peak, the green, dark green peak. That dark green is a beautiful bristlecone pine forest. You can see adventures up there on Las Vegas area trails. Mummy Mountain. And then back over here you can see the horse farms, or the horse ranches, sorry. You probably don't like to be called farms. Horse ranches on Kyle Canyon Road. Sheep range. And back to the ridge we are ascending. We just ascended this ridge, and now even more spectacular views are opening up. Sheep range, Fossil Ridge, Gas Peak, and our first look at the Las Vegas Valley. Yeah, there's Centennial Hills. Gas Peak. Nope. Sorry. This is Gas Peak. Fossil Ridge. And you're looking at the Desert National Wildlife Refuge area, the largest wildlife refuge south of Alaska, or at least in the lower 48 states. And then here is the sheep range. So yeah, a lot to look at here. And then if you've seen my video, mountain biking up the road, Mormon Road, up the far side of Fossil Ridge here, and then into the largest Joshua tree forest I have seen anywhere on Earth. That would be the basin right there that holds that forest. And by the way, why is my video not shaking when I zoom in? It was during the last adventure. Something ticked off wrong. I figured out how to fix it. I'll share that before the end of this adventure. And then, wow, Mount Charleston Wilderness. You can see the whole thing all the way to La Madre Mountain Wilderness, La Madre Mountains. But what lies ahead? We are 200 feet below the highest point here. And yes, there is yet another ridge to summit. And yeah, I know I've said this a lot, but I think that the ridge on the horizon is the ridge over which you can see the entire Las Vegas Valley. And that is the upper ridge line of Harris Springs Canyon Ridge that we're on. And this right here could classify as the highest point, or one, further to the right. But we're only a couple hundred feet below the highest point. So if that's not the highest point, it's pretty close. Onward. We have been ascending this ridge line, and you can see where we summited that first ridge right in that area. And just to keep perspective and reference points, there's the horse ranches. But look at this. Okay, up to this point. Wow. There below us is much of the Las Vegas Valley. Gas Peak, and then descending down to the valley. And we're at about 6,000 feet now. That may be a summit that is just a little bit higher than this. I don't know if I'm going to go there. There's a nice saddle between, and it would not be too hard. Remember what I said about why we didn't come up the other side of this and vertical areas? Yeah, there you have some. And then looking around in this direction, you can see that's why we didn't come up that side, even though the lighting would have been better. It probably would have been a one-way trip for me. So, yeah, Sheep Range over to Gas Peak, down to the Clark County Gun Range, at the base of Gas Peak. And then downward Centennial Hills. And like I said, this ridgeline is massive, from Kyle Canyon on the north end to Lone Mountain Road on the south end. And it's not a straight direction, it's angled. The upper end is angled to the northeast. And then the ridge line angles to the southwest. And here you can see a wash leading over to, you can't see it from here, but it would be the Cheyenne Mountain area. And then up along the Madre ridgeline, back over to the Mount Charleston Wilderness. And by the way, Griffith Peak, take a look at that. Pointy Peak. If you were to descend straight down from Griffith Peak, you'd be on Sexton Ridge. Look that up on Las Vegas area trails, and you'll see how we descended and ascended Sexton Ridge. And the ridge in the foreground is, before Sexton Ridge, descending from Griffith Peak, is the Wilson Ridge ascending to Harris Mountain, which I got to say is my favorite mountain in the Mount Charleston Wilderness. Wild, untouched. Okay, so there you have it. The Harris Springs Canyon Ridgeline. And by the way, down in this area, oh, what do we see? Do I dare say we're looking at Cheyenne Mountain right there, which would make this potentially Lone Mountain. Yeah, I see the highway along the base of the mountain. Too much glare on the screen, so I'm not able to center in on Lone Mountain. Yeah, it would be something like that. And you can see maybe a trail leading up to the summit, and Highway 215 would be passing along the base of the summit and then circling around in this direction off toward the Aliante area, and where it will eventually connect with Highway 15 and head up into Utah. So yeah, there is a lot of the terrain and reference points from this high ridge line. Let's go over toward that next high point. I'm running low on time. The reason I chose this today is I'm administering a U.S. Racket Sports Association conference. We're doing a practice session this afternoon at 4, I've got to be back. If they knew I was up here right now, they might not like that. But anyway, yeah, so convenient, so close, and yet so wild. That's why I chose this. Yes, I had to come over to the summit. So here we are. There's a little pile of rocks on the summit. And let's see. Oh, wow. There is a summit box, except in this case, it's a jar. Little notepad inside to record your arrival on the summit. Wow. Look at this. This is looking southwest. And we'll just continue over the La Madre Mountains. We'll do a circuit. La Madre Mountains, Sexton Ridge leading up to the pointy Griffith Peak, and then to the right of that, the snow-covered Charleston Peak, the long Mummy Mountain summit area with Fletcher Peak just to the left of Mummy's Toe. Over to the Sheep Range, Gas Peak, Las Vegas Valley, Sheer Cliff, right over the edge here. Do not want to ever take that. It does look possible to ascend from over here. Interesting. You can see below. Maybe, but I'm not excited about trying that. I think it'd be possible though. And then just another quick circle. You point out the reference points. Okay, and let's zoom in on some of these. Cheyenne Mountain. And to the right, a little further out, is Lone Mountain. Too much glare on the screen. I don't know if I nailed it, but yeah, Lone Mountain's down there. Frenchman Mountain. And over on the other side would be Lake Mead. To the left of Frenchman Mountain, Sunrise Mountain. Muddy Mountains. And by the way, there are adventures on all of these high points on LasVegasAreaTrails.com with video documentation. Gas Peak. Sheep Range. Gas Peak was 7,000 feet, Sheep Range 10,000. There's the horse ranches down on Kyle Canyon Road. And believe it or not, let's zoom in as best we can on Kyle Canyon Road and the trailhead. Yeah, there it is right down there. Angel Peak. Air Force radar installation at the summit that white ball. Mummy Mountain, Fletcher Peak. Take a closer look at Mummy Mountain. Charleston Peak. Griffith Peak, Harris Mountain, that forested summit to the right, a little in front. There's the line of the Sexton Ridge leading down from Griffith Peak, the Wilson Ridge leading down from Harris Mountain. Level Canyon is between. And then over to El Padre Mountain and La Madre Mountain. Pretty awesome what you can see from this point. And then, yeah, I had mentioned a ridge and a potential approach to the La Madre Mountains, and you can see a ridge line ascending from the valley below. There it is ascending, and it looks like you could indeed continue up here. It'd definitely be wild, but you get along the top and then navigate around and over to Little La Madre, and El Padre. Actually, that may be either El Bastardo or Burnt Peak. I think El Padre is hidden behind La Madre. And then to the right of El Bastardo, let's say, is the Wilson Ridge begins, heads up all the way to Harris Mountain. So there you have it. And now we have to hightail it back. But what an adventure when you don't have a whole lot of time during the day. I've been taking my time, and it's not yet 11 o'clock. So yeah, I need to be back by 2. That means home. So down we go, and you can see the high point over on the other side of the saddle, and then descend down to this point, the rounded ridge line. Find the approach ridge from there. I want to be on the correct side of that huge gully that's lined with cliffs, and then back down. So awesome adventure, easy to get to the trailhead and to get to the summit. Nothing beyond class 2, which means I didn't have to use my hands to lift myself over any rocks or boulders. Okay, on the way down, I'm over halfway down, and you can see the crack that we summited on the left side above that crack earlier, and up to that point the sun's not blinding us, so yeah, much more visible here. And continuing downward toward that point where we descended into the first wash. So it's straight ahead, and the trailhead is actually, oh, let's see. I was going to say the trailhead is actually behind, but now I've lost that spot. Yeah, here we go. Trailhead area, Kyle Canyon Road. So, yep. On course, descending more than half the, probably 2/3 of the altitude has been lost, and you can see we're going to descend into the wash here and then continue on the little trail in the road you see ahead back to the trailhead. And by the way, that peak that I used as a marker, yes, we know we return on the left side, the left base of that peak with the rocky summit. So we're totally on course. Okay, looking back at the ridgeline now that the sun is not blinding us, you can see the basic route we took up to that high point and then beyond to the summit. Yeah, much better views of the ridgeline here in the afternoon. Sheep range. Here's a little trail I'm shooting for. Should lead us back to the trailhead, or at least get us closer. There's our reference point, the rocky high point on the hill, and we know that we circle around the left side and then to the trailhead. Another look back at Harris Springs Canyon and the ridge above it that I'm calling Harris Springs Canyon Ridge. Now that we're not blinded by the sun, you see a lot of things that were just not visible on the trip here this morning. Yeah, I really took my time on the way. On the way back, looks like, yeah, it took about, I don't know, 4 hours, more than 4 hours, because I was really messing around a lot. But on the way back, we're looking at 2 hours, and it'd probably be a 2-hour trip up and maybe a 1.5 hour trip back as you become familiar with this route. And here is the route back. I think 1 or 2 more canyons to cross. We'll find out. Another view looking back at Harris Springs Canyon and Harris Springs Canyon Ridgeline above. And yes, we know that the horizon we're seeing is about 2/3 of the way up the ridgeline, but it's definitely not the summit of the ridgeline. There we're looking toward the northeast, Gas Peak in the background, and then from the northeast end of the ridgeline, let's get a large view of the ridgeline. And you can see the crack. We ascended just the upper left side of that crack. On the ridge. Good view the whole way. Here's the valley below, and then again looking toward the trailhead on the left side of this high hill on the right with the rocky summit area. Which has been one of our markers for today. So now it's just a matter of following trails and heading back. Another view of the ridge line. Now there's two canyons between us. And yes, from here you can see the true summit point up, I believe, right over here. Yeah, there we go. Or maybe that's the true summit point. Remember, we had that saddle to descend and reascend. So there you have it. And the final washed across. Yeah, it looks like quite a plunge to get over to the road on the other side. However, I do believe that we can wind our way down one of these gullies here. We'll find out. Looks a little slick and steep, but we should be able to do it. And just crossed this last wash we were looking at from the opposite side above. Here's a farewell look at Harris Springs Canyon Ridgeline and the canyon beneath. And now it's just a matter of heading over the hill here and then down to the trailhead. And here we are back at the trailhead parking area. And we were looking at that parking area from way up at the summit, which is right. It's on the right end there. There, right in the center. There's that saddle. And then, if you look carefully, you can see the ridge line we descended and the cracks on either side of that ridge. So as we conclude here, just a quick review. This trailhead parking area is only about 10 minutes from Centennial Hills, down Kyle Canyon Road to the right. And that makes this really easy to access, very quick. The trip up to the ridge line over in this direction, you can see it. The trip up to the ridge line could be done in under 2 hours with some practice. which makes it a great workout course for mountain climbing. Build some endurance and strength as you tackle that hill, and then also agility as you deal with the loose rock and the limestone. Totally amazing. Put this on your list. I think it's a must visit, especially if you live in Northwest Vegas. And by the way, here you can freeze the video, and there's some information about the area and La Madre Mountains Wilderness. And by the way, I just want to make clear you can get to the summit of the ridgeline in 2 hours with some practice, an hour and a half or less for the return, making 3.5 hours or less for the entire out and back.